Inside the Rockefeller Museum in Jerusalem, fragment 4Q206 rests behind climate-controlled glass. The parchment measures 9 centimeters wide, barely the span of a human hand. Custody transferred to the Israel Antiquities Authority in 1967, and credentialed scholars must apply for access. What survives on that fragment are Enoch's own words. The petition was denied. This was not written as prophecy. It was written as a verdict already delivered. Canon councils removed it. Late antiquity, deliberate, final. The text that circulated among Second Temple communities, copied, studied, treated as sacred, was stripped from the canon and buried. Aramaic fragments recovered from Cave 4 at Qumran confirm it was present and in active use. Over 20 separate manuscript fragments. That number alone flips the status of this text from fringe curiosity to documented tradition. What the Book of Enoch actually records is not mythology, not allegory. It records an irrevocable divine verdict, a judgment handed down against a specific group of beings for a specific transgression, sealed permanently, with no mechanism for appeal. That is the literal claim of the text, and the manuscript evidence supports it. In the next several minutes, you will see the oath that initiated the transgression, the corruption it produced, the petition the watchers sent through Enoch, and the structural reason forgiveness was never going to be granted. If forbidden biblical history is what keeps you up at night, subscribe now. Every week, this channel surfaces what was removed, suppressed, or quietly set aside, and follows the manuscript trail wherever it leads. The oldest surviving Aramaic copy of the passage in question is fragment 4Q201, held in the Shrine of the Book collection in Jerusalem. The translation that became the scholarly standard was produced by R.H. Charles in 1906, published by Oxford University Press, and it remains the baseline reference for the English-speaking academic world today. The passage opens at the 6th verse of the 6th section of 1 Enoch. 200 beings, named individually, swearing together. That detail matters more than it first appears. The Aramaic text identifies these beings with a specific term, Irene. The root does not mean spirit or angel in the generic sense. Irene means those who do not sleep. Watchers. Beings defined by perpetual vigilance, by the inability to cease observing. That is not a poetic title. In the cosmology of the text, it is a functional description of what they are, and the fragment preserves that term with precision. Now consider what the text says they did with that identity. 200 of them descended. The text names the location, Mount Hermon, elevation 2,814 meters above sea level, the highest peak in the ancient Levantine world, visible from Damascus, visible from the Sea of Galilee, a landmark that dominated the geography of the region. The author does not say a mountain. The author says that mountain. The specificity is deliberate. But here is what stops the careful reader. The oath the watchers swore was not a simple agreement. The text describes a binding collective oath, structured so that no single member of the group could act alone, and no single member could defect. Every one of the 200 was bound to every other. The transgression, when it came, would be shared. The liability would be shared. The verdict, when it came, would be shared. That legal architecture, collective oath, mutual liability, no exit clause, is not invented. It is not a narrative device. It matches a specific form of treaty law documented in the ancient Near East. Hittite suzerainty treaties from the 14th century before the Common Era, recovered from the Royal Archive at Hattusa, modern-day Bogazkoy in Turkey, Catalogued by scholars including Gary Beckman in his 1996 compilation of Hittite diplomatic texts, use precisely this structure. A superior party, subordinate parties, a sworn oath binding all subordinates to each other and to the terms. Collective consequence for collective violation. The author of 1st Enoch had no access to the Hittite archive. That archive was buried under a Turkish hillside and unknown to the modern world until excavations beginning in 1906, the same year Charles published his translation. The legal form encoded in the oath on Mount Hermon matches a treaty structure that no Second Temple writer could have reconstructed from available sources. Yet it is there, precise, functional, legally coherent. The oath on Hermon was not a story about rebellion. It was a binding legal instrument. And like any treaty oath in the ancient Near Eastern tradition, violation triggered automatic, predetermined consequence. The punishment was not discretionary. It was not subject to negotiation after the fact. It was built into the structure of the oath itself at the moment of swearing. That is the mechanism the text preserves.
Before we continue, I want to show you something that could completely change how you see the Book of Enoch and what was buried inside it. Most people spend years collecting fragments of knowledge without ever finding the complete picture. That's exactly why we built the complete library. It brings together the Watcher's descent and their forbidden transmissions, the angelic hierarchy and its role in the end time sequence, the soul's journey through death into the intermediate state, and the precise prophetic timeline running all the way to the final judgment into one practical system. If you've enjoyed the teachings we've explored on this channel, you're going to love what's inside. You can find it through the link in the description below or by scanning the QR code on your screen. I'll give you a second to do that.
That is what the fragment in Jerusalem holds under climate-controlled glass. And that is exactly why what came next could not be undone. The manuscript that preserves this testimony is held in the Ethiopic corpus designated the Book of the Watchers. The specific passage comes from verses 3 through 7 of the 15th section. Michael Knibb produced the standard English translation in 1978 through Oxford University Press. That translation has not been superseded in nearly 50 years. Knibb works from the Ge'ez directly, and the Ge'ez does something the English obscures. The term rendered as sinners in older translations is not the word the manuscript uses. The word is magabian. It means those who defile. Not those who err, not those who stumble, those who contaminate. The distinction is not a matter of nuance. It is a matter of category. Sinners can repent. Those who defile leave something behind them that repentance cannot reach. The text is precise about what was left behind. The Watchers descended. They took human women. The union produced offspring. And the text gives the height of those offspring, 3,000 cubits. Work that out in modern units, and you're looking at roughly 1,371 meters. That is taller than any structure human civilization has ever built. The Burj Khalifa stands at 828 meters. These figures stood nearly 500 meters above that. Now, you could read that as mythological inflation, symbolic excess. But notice what the text does not inflate. It does not inflate the number of watchers. It gives a specific count. It does not inflate the geography. It names exact locations. The height of the giants is the one figure that reads like a physical record of something the writer needed to document precisely. And the text moves past it quickly, as if the height is not the point. The point is what happened after the giants died. Here is where the text says something that no second millennium writer had any mechanism to construct from cultural imagination alone. The passage states that when the hybrid offspring were killed, their spirits did not dissolve. They persisted, disembodied, active, released into the world without a body to contain them. And because their nature was mixed, part spiritual, part material, they belonged fully to neither realm. They could not ascend. They could not rest. They remained. He had no framework to fabricate that from. The concept of a disembodied spirit, produced specifically by the death of a human-divine hybrid, is not a standard Near Eastern mythological trope. It is a precise theological mechanism, and it appears here, in this manuscript, in this language, with this specificity. The modern match is not vague. Scholars of ancient Near Eastern religion, including Judd Burton in his 2009 study on the origin of demons in Mesopotamian and Semitic traditions, trace the oldest stratum of evil spirit belief to exactly this logic: disembodied spirits arising from slain hybrid beings. The tradition surfaces in Akkadian incantation texts from the 2nd millennium BCE. It surfaces in Ugaritic material. It surfaces in later Aramaic demonology. Every time, the same underlying architecture. The spirits are not primordial. They are produced. They are the residue of a corruption that was ended but could not be erased. That is the century bridge. The ancients called them wandering spirits. Modern comparative religion calls them chthonic residuals. Same phenomenon, different vocabulary, separated by 3,000 years of independent attestation. And this is what the text means by contamination that could not be undone. Forgiveness might have addressed the watchers themselves. It could not address what they had already released. The spirits were already loose. The damage was already generational. Pardoning the source does not neutralize what the source has already set in motion. The text understood that. The verdict understood that. And Enoch was the one who had to carry both. The passage that records Enoch's role as courier comes from two separate moments in the Ethiopic text. The first is in the 13th section, verses 1 through 3. The second is in the 14th section, verses 4 through 7. Both are drawn from the Ethiopic Codex tradition. R.H. Charles published his English translation of this material in 1906, and it remains one of the most cited renderings of the Enochic corpus in academic literature. Charles noticed something the casual reader misses. The text does not simply say, Enoch wrote down the petition and delivered it. It gives a location. Enoch reads the petition aloud beside the waters of Dan. That is an exact geographic marker. Dan is in the far north of ancient Israel, near the headwaters of the Jordan River. The site is identifiable. It has been excavated. It exists on modern maps. The text is not placing this scene in a mythological landscape. It is placing it in a real one. That specificity matters. It is the kind of detail a fabricator omits and a recorder includes. Now look at the ge'ez verb the text uses when the petition is complete. Tafasama. It is finished. In ge'ez, this verb carries a judicial weight that the English phrase barely captures. Tafasama does not mean concluded in the sense of ended. It means sealed in the sense of closed, irreversibly. The same verb appears in ge'ez legal documents to mark the moment a judgment becomes unappealable. It is not a narrative convenience. It is a technical term, and the scribe chose it deliberately. Heaven's response is not silence. That is the detail most summaries of this text get wrong. The watchers expected silence, or perhaps a suspended verdict. What they received was a spoken response, delivered through Enoch, the one righteous man among them, the one who walked with God and was taken. He was not a neutral messenger. His selection was itself part of the verdict. The watchers had abandoned their spiritual station to pursue what was human. Heaven sent a human to deliver the refusal. The inversion is structural. Here is the impossible knowledge beat. The petition format Enoch carries mirrors Second Temple intercessory prayer with a precision that has no business appearing in a text this old. Second Temple intercessory prayer follows a specific pattern: acknowledgement of divine sovereignty, confession of the sin in question, appeal to divine mercy, and a closing formula of submission. The petition of the Watchers in this text follows that pattern exactly, step by step, formula by formula. The Second Temple period runs roughly from 516 BCE to 70 CE. This textual tradition is older, and yet the prayer architecture is identical. Either the Second Temple tradition drew its intercessory form from this material, or both traditions drew from something older still. Either way, the text is preserving a legal liturgical format that was already ancient when the Qumran scribes were copying it. And then the verdict arrives, spoken, named, reasoned. The text does not simply say the petition was denied. It says the reason for the denial was delivered. The Watchers are told not merely what their punishment is, but why forgiveness was categorically unavailable to them. Not as a matter of divine preference, as a matter of structure. The verdict names the architecture of the impossibility. And this is where it gets disturbing, because the reason the text gives is not cruelty. It is logic. A logic so precise it reads less like a theological pronouncement and more like a legal finding. The kind of finding that cannot be appealed because it is not based on sentiment. It is based on what the Watchers were before they fell, and what that means about what they chose. The passage that delivers the structural reasoning behind the refusal spans 2 sections of the Book of the Watchers, verses 1 through 10 of the 15th section, and verses 1 through 4 of the 16th. Michael Knibb's 1978 Oxford translation is again the primary scholarly reference. These verses have been cross-checked against the Ethiopic manuscript tradition and against the Aramaic fragments recovered from Qumran, and the core legal argument is consistent across all of them. The text opens with a term that reframes everything that follows. The Ge'ez is Keddus, holy ones. That is what the Watchers were. Not powerful ones, not ancient ones, holy ones. In the Ge'ez theological vocabulary, Keddus does not simply denote rank or age. It denotes nature. A being designated Keddus is one whose essence is oriented toward the divine. It is not a title that can be stripped and reattached. It is a description of what something fundamentally is. This is why the sin was without excuse. The text states it plainly. Spiritual beings have no need that flesh supplies. They do not hunger. They do not decay. They are not driven by the biological imperatives that shape human behavior and complicate human moral accountability. When a human being falls, the text understands that the flesh was a factor. When a Keddus falls, there is no such factor. The choice was pure, uncontaminated by need. That is not a mitigating circumstance. It is an aggravating one. The verdict arrives in 3 parts. No peace, no intercession, no lifting of the sentence. Ever. 3 separate closures, each one sealing off a different avenue of potential relief. Peace would have meant a restored relationship. Intercession would have meant a mediating voice could still reach them. A lifted sentence would have meant the judgment was conditional. The text removes all 3, simultaneously, permanently. Now the modern match, and it is precise. The Dead Sea Scrolls include a document designated 1QS, the Rule of the Community. It was recovered from Cave 1 at Qumran and has been dated by paleographic analysis to between 100 and 75 BCE. The document uses language of eternal condemnation for those who violate the covenant in full knowledge of its terms. The phrasing is not borrowed from generic Near Eastern curse formulae. Scholars, including Florentino Garcia Martinez, in his 1994 critical edition of the Scrolls, have noted the structural parallel to the Enochic tradition directly. The Qumran community was reading Enoch, They were building their legal theology on its framework. The same architecture of irreversible judgment appears in both bodies of text, separated by centuries of independent development. That is the century bridge. The Enochic verdict and the Qumran sectarian law are not using the same language by coincidence. They are drawing from the same foundational legal logic. Angelic judgment, once rendered for a sin committed from a position of full knowledge, is structurally irreversible. Not because the divine is inflexible, because the nature of the sin forecloses the mechanism by which forgiveness operates. Forgiveness requires a gap between what was known and what was chosen. The Watchers had no such gap. They were Kadidus. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they did it anyway. That is not a story about divine anger. That is a record of a legal finding. And the verdict that came from it has never, according to the text, been revisited. But the record does not end there, because the question the text leaves open is not whether the verdict stands. It is what the verdict implies for everything that came after it. Fragment 4Q206 sits in the Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem. Today. Not in a scholar's footnote. In a climate-controlled vault you can visit. The complete Ethiopic Codex remains in Addis Ababa, never retracted, never revised. And the verdict recorded in 1 Enoch chapter 16 verse 4 has not changed. The judgment is sealed. That is the present tense condition of the evidence. But the text goes one step further. The disembodied spirits it names, the offspring who outlasted the flood, are still described as active. The mechanism the verdict addressed is still, according to the record, running. The petition was denied. Not ignored, denied. What does that distinction mean to you? If suppressed biblical records like this one matter, subscribe. There is more.